Have you ever been underestimated so completely that you could feel the weight of their laughter, their mockery, pushing you deeper into the shadows? That's how it felt as I sat at the dinner table, the crystal glass of red wine trembling slightly in my hand. The laughter bounced off the walls, harsh, like knives slicing through the air. Ethan's voice was sharp, almost playful. "Another month of unemployment, huh, sweetie? Maybe you should try a coffee shop gig," he teased. His buddies James, Daniel, and David erupted into laughter, their expensive suits and smug grins reflecting their superiority. The clink of glasses sounded like a symphony to their egos. They didn't see me, didn't see how my fingers tightened around the wine glass, didn't see the way I dipped my head, letting my hair curtain my face, feigning the sting they expected. But they had no idea. None of them. Not even Ethan, my husband, sat at the head of the table, basking in the glow of his arrogance. Ethan, the vice president of Cortec Innovations, he thought he was the reason for our success, the one who held everything together. He thought he was the hero. And here I was, the wife he barely noticed, a punchline to his jokes. It's funny, isn't it, how a man can sit at the table, surrounded by his closest friends, wearing his shiny new Rolex, believing he built an empire, believing that he had it all, while the woman who made it happen is silenced, hidden in plain sight. I'd played the part well. For 7 years, I had been the struggling wife, the one who couldn't get it together. I'd let him think I was scraping by, trying to find my footing in the world. All while Cortec had been my creation, while I built it, piece by piece, from the ground up. From the cramped apartment where it all started to the boardrooms where Ethan and his friends now paraded their success, none of them ever saw me. Tonight was no different. As I sat there, a quiet observer in my own home, they continued to laugh, oblivious to the fact that everything they had, their power, their positions, their smug satisfaction, had been bought with my silence. They thought I was weak. They thought I was the one who needed saving, but soon they'd learn the truth. In a few hours, everything would change. I wasn't just the wife sitting at the table. I was the one who had been pulling the strings all along. I couldn't help but smile, just a little, as they continued to mock me. The wine, bitter on my tongue, was nothing compared to the sweetness of what was to come. How long can you pretend to be invisible? How long can you sit quietly, taking it, before something inside you snaps? It's a slow burn. The tension builds layer by layer until you're so consumed by it that you start to feel it in your bones, in your every movement. It's there in the way Ethan's voice starts to change, from casual teasing to something sharper, more pointed. In the way his friends laugh a little too loudly when he tells them, "You're so lucky, Alexis, having a husband who can support you while you figure it out." That's how he saw me, after all. Someone who was lucky. Someone he was doing a favor by letting tag along in his life. Someone who needed him to succeed. His success, of course. His empire. His world. But what he didn't know, what none of them knew, was how carefully I was watching them. How meticulously I was gathering every word, every look, every piece of the puzzle that would eventually bring them to their knees. It started with those small moments, the ones that seemed insignificant at the time, but I knew better. A casual comment here, a dismissive gesture there. It was in the way Ethan would roll his eyes when I mentioned anything business-related, as if I didn't understand what it took to build something real. "Freelance marketing? Come on, Alexis. You need to aim higher than that," he'd say with that smug little grin of his, as if I were some naive child dreaming too big. I learned not to answer him, not to challenge him. Instead, I smiled, nodded, and played the part. He wanted me to be the dutiful wife, the quiet shadow, always supporting him but never stepping into the light myself. So I gave him what he wanted. I allowed him to think I was beneath him. It wasn't a lie, not really. I wasn't beneath him, but I was careful. Careful to keep my strength hidden, my power cloaked in humility. And slowly, the cracks began to show. Not in me, but in him. The same arrogance that had once made him charming now made him insufferable. The same friends who once admired him for his ambition, James, Daniel, David, were now all too eager to laugh at my expense, to ridicule me in front of him. To them, I was just a joke. To Ethan, I had become something to be pitied. I could feel it, the subtle shift. He didn't pity me for my lack of ambition anymore. It was deeper. He pitied me for not being important, for not being useful. His pride swelled as Cortec grew, and as it did, his sense of superiority ballooned. He'd walk through the door after another day of playing golf with Daniel, or closing deals with James, tossing his keys on the counter and barely glancing at me. "Rough day," he'd mutter, as if it didn't matter that I'd spent the day quietly watching his every move, logging the tiny betrayals and the big ones. At first I ignored it. I focused on the company, growing it in the shadows, making deals under fake names, ensuring that none of it ever linked back to me. But over time, I started to feel something I hadn't expected. It wasn't anger, not exactly. It was disappointment. In him, in myself, in how easily I had allowed him to treat me like an afterthought in his carefully constructed world. I'd built an empire, and all he saw was a wife who didn't get it. But I did get it. And I wasn't about to let him or his cronies continue to walk all over me. The plan had already begun. I had already started laying the groundwork, quietly amassing the evidence, watching his every move, his every mistake. I didn't need to confront him yet. I didn't need to prove anything to him. I only needed to wait. And wait I did, letting the resentment grow, letting the sting of his words and the weight of their laughter carve out a quiet, steady resolve in me. What he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I was never going to be the one who lost in this game. I had something they would never see coming, and I would use it when the time was right. The tension in me, in him, in all of us, was building. And when it finally snapped, when the truth was exposed, no one would be able to ignore it. If you want to take down an empire, you don't charge in head first. No, you wait. You bide your time. You build a strategy so seamless, so precise, that when the moment comes, it's already over before anyone realizes what's happening. I knew this well. After all, I had built Cortec Innovations from the ground up in secret. Every step of the way, I had been playing the long game. It started with whispers. At those dinner parties, the same ones where they laughed at me, where they made their little jokes about how I still hadn't found a real job, I started to hear things, little comments that were meant to be jokes, but held the bitter edge of something darker. I started paying attention and listening closely, and over time I realized something. Ethan, James, Daniel, and David, they weren't just taking advantage of me, they were taking advantage of Cortec. The company I had built, which I had carefully crafted into a powerhouse, was being undermined by the very people I had allowed into my world. They were careless, greedy, and completely unaware that their arrogance was digging their graves. I could have confronted Ethan. I could have gone to him, laid out the evidence, and watched his face fall as the truth hit him. But that would have been too easy. No, I needed something more. Something that would shatter their perception of me once and for all. They needed to believe they were untouchable, that they were the ones in control, so I could rip that control away from them in the most devastating way possible. That's when the plan started to take shape. It started small, with whispers, just as it always does. The first step was to hire private investigators, the best money could buy. I knew I couldn't trust the people already within Cortec. Too many of them were loyal to Ethan, and too many of them had already been bought by his charisma and success. But these investigators were different. They were discreet, professional, and relentless. They shadowed Ethan first, following him to late-night meetings, snapping photos of him shaking hands with competitors, receiving briefcases of cash under the table. The evidence piled up and pee fast, texts, emails, photos. But that was just the beginning. The deeper I dug, the more I uncovered. Ethan wasn't just stealing money from the company. He was selling our secrets to rival firms, leaking confidential information, and approving shady contracts that lined his pockets while destroying Cortec's future. I had enough to bury him, to tear him down piece by piece, but I wanted more. I wanted it all. I started installing surveillance systems within Cortec itself, right under their noses. I tapped into the company's infrastructure, tracking emails, phone lines, and even the servers. Everything was feeding back to me, every conversation, every backdoor deal they thought was secure. They were blind to it. The men who thought they were invincible, who thought they had the company's future in their hands, Didn't realize they were already trapped in my web. The more I learned, the more disgusted I became. These men, Ethan especially, were so wrapped up in their ogos, so used to getting away with anything, that they didn't think about the consequences. Ethan's texts to James, "Keep HR quiet, she's replaceable." The comment about a junior staffer who had complained about harassment. How many people had they crushed along the way? How many lives had they ruined for their gain? I gathered it all, notes, recordings, video clips. But that wasn't enough. I needed a more personal touch. I needed to get inside their world. I needed them to see exactly what they had become. That's when I decided to become someone else, someone they would never suspect. I created the persona of Sarah Mitchell, a struggling nobody, the kind of person they would dismiss without a second thought. A woman with a fake resume, worn-out shoes, and a soft voice that trembled just the right amount. I applied for a low-level marketing job at Cortec, a job I was more than qualified for. I didn't need the position. I already owned the company. But I needed them to see me. I needed to feel the weight of their judgment, their casual cruelty, in person. I needed them to mock me so I could walk away with proof of their rot. Days later, I received the interview notice. Sarah Mitchell, a name they would never remember, a face they would dismiss. But I wasn't there to get the job. I was there to gather the final piece of the puzzle. The trap was set. And now I just had to wait for them to walk right into it. It was time for them to finally see who I was. Walking into the Cortec office, I was nothing more than a ghost. Sarah Mitchell, the woman they'd never remember. My heart didn't race. There was no panic, no fear, just cold, calculated focus. I had worked too long, watched too much, and waited too patiently to lose control now. The company I had built, the empire that Ethan and his friends had toyed with, was mine to reclaim, and no one would stand in my way. The receptionist at the front desk barely glanced at me as she handed me a visitor's badge. She smiled, robotic, and told me the interview would be on the 7th floor. I nodded politely, swallowed the lump in my throat, and made my way toward the elevator. It was too quiet in here, too sterile. There was no warmth, no sign of the company I had created. The one that had once been a bright, promising startup. Now it felt cold, tainted by greed. By them. When I reached the 7th floor, I was greeted by a trio of familiar faces, Ethan's entourage, James, Daniel, and David. They were sitting around a conference table, their expensive suits neatly pressed, their arrogant smirks plastered across their faces. I could see it in their eyes the moment I walked in. Sarah Mitchell, a woman they would barely glance at. A lower-level job candidate is someone they could ignore, ridicule, or tear down with no consequences once. Ethan, always the leader of the pack, leaned back in his chair, his hands steepled in front of his face. "Well, well, Ms. Mitchell," he began, his voice dripping with the same condescension I had heard too many times before. "Freelance marketing, huh? Been unemployed for a while, I see. Must be tough finding the right fit, especially with your experience." He didn't need to look at my resume to know he was already judging me. I glanced down at the table, feigning discomfort, trying to play my part. "Yes, it's been tough," I murmured, letting my voice tremble just the right amount. "I've been looking for the right opportunity." James, sitting across from Ethan, let out a low chuckle. "The market's brutal, isn't it? We get hundreds better than you, Sarah," he said, as if the words were meant to sting. He didn't even bother to look at me when he said it, already turning his attention back to his phone. I nodded, head slightly bowed. "Yes, I understand," I whispered, my hands trembling in my lap, just enough for them to notice. They loved that. They loved seeing me squirm, seeing me shrink in front of them. Daniel, who had been slouching in his chair, sat up straighter and looked at my resume, then back at me with a bored smirk. "You know," he said, his voice laced with mock sympathy, "maybe retail's hiring. Or, there's always coffee shops." His words cut through me like a blade, but I didn't flinch. I couldn't. I kept my gaze lowered, the quiet, invisible woman they thought I was. The whole time I was watching them. watching the way they subtly, so subtly, derided me, poking fun at my supposed lack of ambition, my past failures, the mess I had made of my so-called career. What they didn't realize, though, was that I wasn't Sarah sitting in front of them. It was Alexis, the woman they had mocked, the woman they thought had no power. The interview dragged on for a few more minutes. They didn't care about my skills or experience. They were looking for weaknesses to exploit, for something to ridicule. Ethan glanced at his phone, checking the time, likely thinking about his next golf game or the meetings he had scheduled with other industry bigwigs. He didn't notice how I was slipping the final pieces into place, how I was taking note of every slight, every snide remark. This was my moment. They were blind to it. Finally, James tossed my resume aside. "We'll be in touch," he said, a dismissive wave of his hand as he stood, already walking out of the room without so much as a second glance. Daniel and David followed suit, all of them too busy with their own lives to realize what they'd just done. To realize that, in their mockery, they had handed me the final nail in the coffin. I stood up slowly, my hands shaking as I clutched my folder. "Thank you," I said quietly, the words barely a whisper. I lowered my head, making my way to the door, feeling their eyes on my back as I left. I wasn't humiliated. I wasn't broken. The humiliation they thought they had inflicted on me was, in fact, my victory. The real Sarah Mitchell would have left the room defeated, crushed. But not me. I wasn't Sarah. I was Alexis, and I had just walked out with something they could never take from me, the truth. Their cruelty, their indifference, it was all documented. And soon they would learn that they had underestimated the wrong woman. I stepped into the elevator, the doors closing softly behind me. I couldn't help but smile as I pressed the button for the ground floor. They would regret this. It was only a matter of time before their world crumbled. The next morning I stood in front of the boardroom at CoreTech, the place that had once been my quiet, secret triumph. The one I had built? No, the one I owned, from the ground up. I had spent years in the shadows, allowing Ethan, James, Daniel, and David to believe they were the ones in control. They'd laughed at me and mocked me for my perceived failure, but now the tables were turning. I sat at the head of the table, calm and composed. In front of me was a thick folder, each page a nail in their coffin. The power had already shifted. They just didn't know it yet. The meeting would begin soon, and I had every intention of revealing the truth. As I sat there, I could feel the weight of their ignorance. Ethan, the man who thought he built everything, thought he was untouchable. James, Daniel, and David, they walked in, oblivious, like characters in a play they thought was written for them. Their arrogance was palpable. Ethan had his usual smug grin plastered on his face, his tailored suit hugging his chest, and his Rolex gleaming under the harsh lights. He walked toward the VP's seat and sat down like he owned the place, completely unaware that I had already stripped him of everything he thought was his. The rest of the men followed. James, with his usual self-satisfied smile, Daniel with his irreverent swagger, and David, who had a phone glued to his hand, as usual, checking messages from the next client he could bleed dry. They were like puppets, and they didn't realize who was holding the strings. "Morning, Alexis," Ethan said, casually dropping into the seat across from me, his tone too cheerful. He didn't know how much I had seen, how much I had heard. He didn't know the storm I was about to unleash. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The silence stretched between us, thick and heavy, like a veil that was slowly being lifted. Ethan's eyes flicked toward the folder on the table. "What's all this?" His voice was light, mocking, but I saw the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. He hadn't realized yet what was about to happen. "Before we begin," I said, my voice cold and unwavering, "I'd like to reintroduce myself." They all froze. Ethan's grin faltered slightly, and for the first time in years, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Doubt. Just a spark. The others shifted in their seats, their attention now fully on me. "I am Alexis Mitchell," I said, my voice clear and strong, founder and CEO of CoreTech Innovations. The room fell silent. I watched the realization hit them, one by one. Ethan's jaw tightened. His eyes narrowed in confusion, disbelief, and then something darker. Panic. James's confident smirk was gone, replaced with a blank stare. Daniel's posture stiffened, and even David, who had been texting, put his phone down and looked up, his expression unreadable. I didn't wait for them to recover. Instead, I clicked a button on the remote in front of me, and a massive screen behind me flickered to life. The room was flooded with images, emails, text messages, and recordings. Evidence. I had it all. The years of their corruption. The deals they thought were hidden. The kickbacks they'd accepted. The way they had used Cortec to line their pockets at the expense of everyone else. "Do you recognize these?" I asked, my voice still even, almost casual. The words fell like daggers. "Emails where you sold company secrets to competitors. Transactions where you siphoned money into offshore accounts. Texts where you laughed about destroying people's lives just to line your own pockets. These are your sins, and they're all here, for everyone to see." Each slide, each image, each piece of evidence slammed into them piece by piece. I could feel the tension in the room, a thick, suffocating silence, as the weight of the truth settled on them. Ethan's face went pale. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. His voice, his power, was gone. James fidgeted in his chair, his confidence crumbling. Daniel's arms crossed tightly over his chest as if he could physically protect himself from the avalanche of truth. David, ever the indifferent one, looked like he was slowly suffocating in the truth I was laying bare. And then I saw it. A tiny flicker of fear in Ethan's eyes. He had always been the untouchable one, the one with the power, the one who thought he could do no wrong. But now, he was nothing. A man exposed. "I have enough evidence to send you to jail," I continued, standing up now, my presence filling the room. "But that's not why I'm here. I'm here to reclaim what is mine." The room was silent, suffocating. The only sound was the clicking of the remote as I moved from one slide to the next. The more I showed, the more their faces twisted. Ethan couldn't hide his shock anymore. He had no answers, no excuses. He was completely exposed. I slid the termination papers across the table, one for each of them. "Effective immediately," I said, letting the words hang in the air. "You're fired." Ethan shot up from his seat, his face red, his voice rising in panic. "You can't do this. I built this company. I'm the VP. You need me." He was stumbling now, desperation creeping into his tone. I cut him off, my voice sharp, final. "You built nothing. I created this company. I hired you. I let you into my life, and now I'm throwing you out." He staggered back, his hands raised in a futile attempt to regain control, to salvage what was left of his dignity. But it was gone. Just like that. Ethan turned to his friends, eyes wild, searching for backup. James, Daniel, and David shrank back, their arrogance dissolving as quickly as their masks. They could see it now. The empire they thought they had built, the power they thought they controlled, it was all mine. "Security's waiting," I said coolly, nodding to the doors behind them. They didn't fight it. They couldn't. The sound of security's footsteps echoed through the hall as they filed in, their uniforms a stark contrast to the once glamorous suits of Ethan and his friends. The four men were escorted out like children, their faces stricken with disbelief, their world crumbling around them. I didn't need to watch them leave. I didn't need to revel in their downfall. I had already won. This was not about revenge. It was about reclaiming what was mine. The doors closed behind them, and the room was left in silence. A silence that felt right, like everything had fallen into place. Cortec was mine again, and this time, it would never be the same. The silence that followed their departure was almost deafening. The once untouchable executives, now nothing more than shadows trailing behind security, had been stripped bare. Their downfall hadn't been messy or drawn out. It had been swift, precise, and satisfying. But the true work had only just begun. I sat back down at the head of the table, the weight of the last hour finally sinking in. The evidence was on the screen, their lies and corruption exposed for everyone to see. But that was just the beginning. I had spent too many years in the shadows to simply enjoy the satisfaction of their fall. This was only step one. There were more important matters to attend to. Core-tech innovations had been tainted by them, by their greed, and by the toxic culture they had built. But it was my company. It had always been mine, and now it was time to rebuild. And rebuild it, I would. Stronger, fairer, more transparent than it had ever been before. The next few days were a whirlwind of meetings. Shareholders, employees, media outlets, all buzzing with questions. Some were curious, some skeptical, and a few, I could tell, were afraid. But I didn't waver. I had already made the hard decisions. Now, it was time to act. I started by addressing the employees directly, the ones who had stayed, the ones who had witnessed the corruption but had been too afraid to speak up. I called an all-hands meeting in the atrium. The company had been through a storm, and now I had to show them the future. As I stood before them, 1,000 faces staring up at me, I could feel the tension in the room. Some were hesitant. They had seen the worst of what Core-tech had become under Ethan and his crew. They'd lived through the toxic environment they created, where no one's voice mattered, where power was abused, and where the people who truly made the company great were pushed aside. But today, things would change. I know the past has been difficult, I began, my voice steady and clear. I know that many of you have felt unheard, unseen, but that ends today. This is our company, and we will rebuild it, together. I could see the relief in their eyes. The tension started to break, slowly but surely. These people, my people, were ready for change. They had suffered under the weight of Ethan's arrogance and his crew's corruption, but now, they were ready for a future where their voices mattered. We will make Core-tech a place of transparency, fairness, and respect, I continued. No more backroom deals, no more harassment, no more silence. We will build a culture where everyone is valued, where talent is nurtured, and where no one is above the law. The room was quiet, but I could feel the shift happening. There was a spark in the air, a sense of hope where there had been none before. I could hear the murmurs start, the soft ripple of excitement building as the employees began to understand that things were going to be different now. That night, I met with the board. There was no more pretending, no more half measures. I had already started making the changes, removing the executives who had been complicit in the corruption, installing new leadership where it was needed, and putting in place policies that would hold everyone accountable, from the top down. But it wasn't just about cleaning the house. It was about building something new, something better. I hired Kelsey Reed, a software engineer who had been overlooked for far too long. Ethan had pushed her out simply because she didn't fit into his boys' club. She was smart, driven, and had been sidelined for years. I called her personally. "I don't just want you back, Kelsey," I told her. "I want you leading our AI team." When she walked back through the doors of Core-tech, head high and with no fear in her step, I knew I had made the right choice. And she wasn't the only one. Over the next few weeks, I brought back others who had been wronged by Ethan and his crew. Employees who had been pushed aside, ignored, or dismissed. They had been the backbone of Core-tech, and now they would be the ones to help rebuild it. I also started pushing for a mentorship program, one that would specifically support women in tech. It was time to correct the imbalance that had been allowed to fester under Ethan's leadership. No longer would the men at the top dictate who had value. Everyone had value. In meetings, I made it clear that everyone's voice mattered. No more snide comments, no more dismissive attitudes. Ideas were what mattered, not who had the most power. The company began to feel alive again. Ideas flowed freely. People were excited to come to work, not dreading the next cruel joke or power play. The results spoke for themselves. In the months that followed, Core-tech saw a dramatic turnaround. We signed 3 major contracts in 2 months, including one with a telecom giant that had shunned us when Ethan was at the helm. Stock prices climbed by 35%, and investors, who had once been hesitant to invest under Ethan's leadership, now clamored to back us. But the most rewarding part wasn't the numbers. It wasn't the contracts or the growth. It was walking through the halls of Core-tech and seeing the smiles on the employees' faces, hearing the laughter in the break rooms, and knowing that we had built something real, something lasting. I didn't need to track Ethan's downfall anymore. The media did that for me. His name, along with James's, Daniel's, and David's, was now synonymous with corruption and greed. They had been blacklisted, their reputations destroyed. Ethan was working as a sales clerk at a suburban electronics store. His name didn't carry the same weight it once did, and frankly, I didn't care. His failure was not my victory, it was the world's. Cortec was thriving, it was mine again, and this time, it wasn't just a company. It was a symbol of what happens when you rebuild from the ground up, when you choose integrity over power, and when you let the right people take the lead. I stood at my office window one evening, the city sprawling beneath me. The future of Cortec was bright, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace. I had taken back what was always mine, and I had built something better, something that couldn't be broken. 6 months had passed since the fall of Ethan and his crew, and as I stood by my office window, watching the lights of the city flicker below, I knew that the battle was over. The dust had settled, and Cortec Innovations was flourishing once again. The transformation I had envisioned was no longer just an idea. It was a living, breathing reality. I had taken back control, not with rage or cruelty, but with precision and vision. And the results were undeniable. Stock prices had soared, contracts were flooding in, and our employees, once suffocating under the oppressive weight of Ethan and his cronies, were now thriving. There was a sense of freedom in the air, an energy I hadn't felt in years. Cortec had become a place where people could be their best, where creativity wasn't stifled by power plays and arrogance, where hard work was rewarded and respect wasn't a commodity, it was a given. I hadn't just reclaimed a company, I had reclaimed the culture that made it great. I had taken a space filled with corruption and turned it into one where transparency and fairness were the foundation. And that foundation was strong. The quiet moments were the ones that meant the most. Walking through the halls, seeing employees collaborating without fear, hearing their laughter echo through the break rooms, watching young women in tech finally get the recognition they deserved, it was all I had wanted for this company. It was why I had built it in the first place. Not for ego, not for power, but for something real, something lasting. I thought about Ethan, about how he had once looked at me as though I were nothing, how he'd mocked me for not having a job, for not being the one in the spotlight. I thought about the years I had spent in his shadow, pretending to be something I wasn't, letting him think he was the one who had the power. Now, his empire had crumbled, and mine was soaring. I didn't need to keep track of him, The stories of his fall reached me, of course. How he was now working as a sales clerk at a suburban electronics store, his once glamorous life reduced to selling gadgets for a fraction of the salary he once made. He was banned from working in tech for 3 years due to the terms of his termination, a consequence of his greed and arrogance. His friends, James, Daniel, and David, hadn't fared any better. They were blacklisted from the industry, their names a stain no company wanted to touch. They had become irrelevant. Ghosts. I didn't need to hear their stories, though. I didn't need to gloat. The truth was, I had already won. My victory wasn't about watching them fall. It was about the people I had lifted. It was about the company we had rebuilt. It was about Cortec thriving, not as a symbol of corruption and manipulation, but as a beacon of integrity and innovation. The headlines and financial reports were only the surface. The real change was in the lives of the people who worked here. People who had been overlooked, undervalued, and silenced are now empowered and thriving. Kelsey Reed, who had once been pushed out, was now leading our AI team, taking us to new heights. And she wasn't the only one. There were dozens like her, women and men alike, who had been allowed to shine. Their passion was palpable, and their work was extraordinary. The mentorship program I had launched for women in tech was flourishing. It was growing beyond what I had ever hoped. Young women, eager to make their mark, were finding a voice here, in a space where they were no longer silenced by the dominance of the old guard. They were finally getting the respect they deserved. And that was just the beginning. There was still so much to do, so much more to achieve. I walked into the boardroom that day, ready to make the next move. The investors, the stakeholders, everyone who had once doubted me, who had once questioned whether CoreTech could survive without Ethan's so-called leadership, were now standing behind me, applauding me. The future was bright. We had new markets to explore, new projects to launch, and new dreams to chase. But the best part? No one had to sacrifice their integrity to do it. No one had to step on others to rise. CoreTech is ready for the next phase, I said, standing before the board, my voice steady and confident. We will expand into new markets. We will innovate. And we will do it with integrity. We will continue to build a company that stands for something real, something lasting. The room was filled with applause. The board was on my side, the employees were behind me, and the future had never looked brighter. I didn't need to see Ethan's crumbling life, his failure. I didn't need to check in on him. The joy, the victory, was in the growth of CoreTech, in the way we had built something better together. My empire wasn't about power or revenge. It was about what you do with that power once you have it. And what I had done was simple. I had built something good. 6 months later, as I looked out over the city skyline again, the weight of the past no longer held me down. Ethan and his crew were distant memories, their names mere footnotes in the story of CoreTech. And I was exactly where I needed to be. My legacy wasn't in tearing them down. It was in what I had built from the ashes. True power doesn't come from manipulation or destruction. It comes from creating something meaningful. And that's exactly what I had done. I had turned CoreTech into a symbol of what happens when you reclaim what's yours, not with cruelty, but with strength, vision, and integrity. As I stood there, I smiled. I had won. The future was mine to shape, and nothing could stop me now. I stand frozen in the driveway, my suitcase a lead weight tugging at my arm. Morning sunlight glints off the concrete, sharp and accusing, where 3 cars should be parked: Sarah's red Camry, Michael's gray Tahoe, the boy's green Civic. The spaces gape empty, a silent scream. My breath hitches, cold slicing through my chest. I fumble my phone from my pocket, fingers trembling as I dial Sarah's number for the 5th time. Each ring echoes like a taunt, a hollow pulse in my ear, until her voicemail chirps. Too bright, too distant. Hi, you've reached Sarah White. I can't come to the phone right now. I hang up, the sound cutting off like a snapped thread. The house key dangles between my fingers, its metal edges biting into my palm. 4 years I've turned this key in that lock since Sarah married Michael, and this place swallowed me whole. Now it feels foreign, a relic from someone else's story. I stare at the house, white siding pristine, windows dark, curtains still. No hum of life seeps out, no clatter of Ethan's video games, no thud of Jacob's skateboard. Just silence, thick and suffocating, wrapping around me like damp fog. My sneakers scuff the pavement as I shift, the suitcase thumping against my leg. Where are they? The question gnaws, a splinter under my skin. Yesterday, dinner was quiet. Michael's clipped answers, Sarah's forced smile, the boys' sneaking glances like they knew something I didn't. I went to bed early, my sketchbook open to a half-finished drawing of the oak out back. Did they plan this then, whispering in the dark while I slept? My throat tightens, a sob clawing up, but I swallow it down. The driveway stretches before me, a blank canvas of betrayal, daring me to step forward or run. I clutch the key tighter, its teeth promising answers, or maybe just more questions. The air hums with absence, and I know bone deep that whatever waits inside will crack my world open. I take a step, the crunch of gravel loud as a gunshot, and the audience leans in, waiting too. My feet hit the floor at 8 a.m., the stillness jarring, a wrong chord in a song I thought I knew. Saturday mornings here are never quiet. Michael bangs skillets for his overcooked pancakes. Ethan's video games blare through thin walls. Jacob's skateboard grinds against the driveway. But today, silence cloaks the house, heavy as a shroud. I pause, toes curling against the hardwood, listening for something, anything. Nothing comes. My pulse quickens, a staccato beat in my ears. I drift down the hall, past Ethan's room. His bed's made, sheets taut, no crumpled clothes or controllers scattered like usual. Jacob's is the same, pristine, a showroom lie. My stomach twists, a slow churn. Downstairs, the kitchen gleams. Counters wiped to a sterile shine. A single sheet of paper sits dead center on the marble, corners razor sharp against the edge. I pick it up, the words stark. Watching the house for a week. Food in fridge. 7 words, black ink, no warmth. My breath catches. 7 words to erase me. My phone buzzes in my pocket, a jolt against my hip. Sarah's name flashes, and I answer, hands shaking. Genevieve? Her voice spills out, too light, too practiced. Glad you're awake. I grip the counter, knuckles whitening. Where is everyone? My words sound far off, a stranger's voice. We're on our way to Myrtle Beach, she says, casual as if she's grabbing coffee, not shattering me. Michael thought we needed a family trip. Spring break lined up perfectly. Family trip. The phrase pierces, ice splintering in my veins. Why didn't you take me? I choke out, throat closing around the plea. Oh, honey, she says, that artificial brightness coating her tone like syrup. Michael found this amazing last-minute deal, but they only had room for 4. And you've been so wrapped up in that art project, we thought you'd love the quiet house. A lie, smooth and rehearsed, slipping through the cracks she's built over years. I see it now. Michael at dinner, asking Sarah about my day while I sat there, fork in hand, invisible. Her nods when he called me dramatic, her silence when I begged her to see me. The phone trembles against my ear, tears blurring the note in my hand. Why didn't you wake me, I whisper, but she doesn't answer, just breathes that careful breath she's mastered since Michael. We'll talk when we're back, she says finally, a dismissal. The line goes dead and the silence rushes back, louder now, a roar in my skull. I sink against the counter, the marble cold through my shirt. 4 years of fading. Ethan and Jacob's new bikes at Christmas, my thrift store sketch pads, Michael's late nights during my art shows, Sarah's slow shift from my shield to his shadow. The note flutters to the floor, 7 words mocking me. I'm not part of their family, never was. The realization burns, but it's mine, and I clutch it tight. Tears splash onto my phone screen, hot and silent, as I dial David's number. My voice breaks, a jagged edge. They left me. The words spill out, raw, between sobs. Pack a bag, he says, steady as stone, no hesitation. I'm coming to get you. I hang up, the room tilting, and stumble upstairs. My suitcase yawns open on the bed, and I fold clothes with shaking hands. Jeans, a hoodie, my favorite flannel. My sketchbook slides between layers, its edges worn from months of graphite and dreams. Each crease feels like a lifeline, tethering me to something real. Back in the kitchen, I grab their note, the 7-word lie, and flip it over. My pen scratches across the back. Gone to Dad's. Don't worry about me. The words smear where my tears hit, ink bleeding into paper, but I leave it there, a defiant mark. I pause in the hallway, the row of family photos glaring down. One stops me, Sarah and me, pre-Michael, on a windswept beach. Her arms tight around my shoulders, her laugh real, not this brittle shell she wears now. My reflection flickers in the glass, a ghost over that younger me. 4 years, and I've faded from her frame, pushed aside for Michael's sharper edges. The front door creaks as I open it, suitcase thudding behind me. I turn the key in the lock, the click final, a period on this chapter. David's truck rumbles up minutes later, dust kicking off the tires. He doesn't ask questions, just takes my bag, his hand brushing my shoulder. Solid, warm, a promise. I climb in, the leather seat cool against my legs, and we pull away. The house shrinks in the side mirror, white siding swallowed by distance, until it's gone. My fingers trace the sketchbook's spine, graphite smudging my skin. That beach photo lingers in my mind. Sarah, before she traded me for Michael's approval, before she stopped fighting for me. I've been invisible here, a shadow in their perfect tableau. Ethan and Jacob unwrapping gadgets, while I clutched secondhand books, Michael's voice skipping over me at dinner. David glances over, his jaw tight. "You okay, Jen?" I nod, throat too full to speak. The road hums beneath us, carrying me away from their silence, towards something I can hold. The morning light spills gold across the dashboard, and I breathe, tentative, but free. This isn't running, it's stepping into what's mine. Sarah's ringtone yanks me from sleep at 2:17 a.m., a shrill spike through the dark. I fumble the phone in David's guest room, my voice thick with dreams. "Hello?" "Genevieve?" She rushes out, high-pitched, frantic. "Someone broke into the house. You need to come home right now." Home. The word lands hollow, a stone in my gut. "What happened?" I sit up, flicking on the lamp, its glow harsh against the night. "The house was robbed while we were gone," she says, her breathing ragged, panicked bursts. "The police are here. Michael wants to talk to you, he says." She cuts off, a sob swallowing the rest. "Says what?" My fingers tighten around the phone, nails digging in. "Just come home, please." David's already up when I stumble out, keys in hand, face grim. We drive in silence, streetlights slashing rhythmic shadows across his jaw. The house looms as we pull up, 2 police cruisers flashing red and blue over the familiar facade. The front door gapes open, a wound in the night. I step inside, and chaos greets me. Drawers upended, pillows slashed, the TV gone. Officers move with clipped efficiency, dusting surfaces, scribbling notes. Sarah spots me from the kitchen doorway, her face blotchy, mascara streaking. "Thank God you're here," she says, rushing over, arms outstretched. I step back and her hands drop, limp. Michael materializes behind her, his face carved into hard lines I know from years of silent dinners. "This is your fault," he says, voice slicing through the police chatter, sharp as a blade. Sarah doesn't contradict him, her eyes darting away. Officer Bennett, a woman with a tight bun and steady gaze, looks up from her notepad. "Sir, we don't know that yet." "My mother's sapphire ring is gone," Sarah says, voice cracking. "Worth 10 grand. "Insurance will cover it," David counters, his hand firm on my shoulder. Michael's laugh brittles the air. "Insurance doesn't cover sentiment. You left the door unlocked on purpose, didn't you?" Sarah's accusation lands like a slap, her red-rimmed eyes wild, a stranger's glare. "What?" The word barely escapes my throat, a rasp. "Sarah," David warns, low and sharp. Officer Bennett steps between us. "Ma'am, was the security system on when you left?" Silence stretches, taut. "No," Michael admits, jaw tight. "We were rushed." "And you?" Bennett turns to me. "I didn't set it," I say, steady despite the tremor in my chest. "They were gone when I woke up. I locked the door when I left for Dad's." "She's lying," Michael snaps, pivoting to Sarah. "I told you she's been trouble since day one." My lungs constrict, the walls pressing in, hostile and foreign. "I need to check something," I mutter, slipping past them. Upstairs, my bedroom door creaks open, and I freeze. The bed's still made, my desk neat, sketchbook closed, not a drawer touched. The contrast slams into me, stark, undeniable. Bennett appears beside me, her eyes scanning the stillness. "Interesting," she says, jotting a note. "It doesn't make sense," I whisper, voice thin. "Why trash everything but here?" "Curious," she agrees, her pen pausing. Downstairs, voices spike, Sarah's pleas, Michael's growl. Ethan hovers at the living room's edge, his eyes meeting mine, guilty and soft. "I'm sorry they left you," he murmurs, glancing at Michael. "I wanted to call, but..." He trails off as Mrs. Larson, the neighbor, steps through the open door, robe cinched tight. "Saw the police," she says. "Everything okay?" "Break in," an officer replies. Her gaze finds me. "Oh, Genevieve, you're back. I saw you leave with your bag hours after they took off. Shame you missed their trip." The room stills. Sarah's face drains white. The thread I couldn't tug unravels, and I feel the audience lean closer, hooked. The knock comes after dinner, 3 soft taps that ripple through David's apartment, pulling me from the couch. I open the door, and Ethan stands there, shoulders hunched beneath his oversized hoodie, fingers clutching an old phone like it might bite. His eyes dart past me, scanning the dim space, and his voice trembles as he speaks. "She doesn't know I'm here." Bewilderment washes over me, replacing the wariness that had prickled my skin. Ethan's never set foot here, barely spoken 10 words to me in a year. Yet, now, he's on my threshold, a fugitive from his own house. I step aside, gesturing him in. "Can I come in?" he asks, redundant but urgent, and I nod. He doesn't sit when I point to the couch, just thrusts the phone toward me, his hands unsteady. "I need to show you something," he says, the words tight, like they're choking him. "It's about why Michael hates you, why he always has." David emerges from the kitchen, dish towel in hand, his brow furrowing as he spots Ethan. "Everything all right?" he asks, voice low, cautious. "No," Ethan replies, simple and stark. "Nothing's been right for a long time." He nods at the phone. "It's all there. Sarah's old messages to Michael, ones she didn't know I found." My fingers tremble as I take the battered Samsung, its screen cracked but glowing. I unlock it, and a text thread spills open, dated 2 years back, Sarah's name glaring at the top. Michael. "How'd the talk with Genevieve go about my dad's visit?" Sarah. "Disaster. Said she doesn't care about some old man she barely knows." My breath catches, sharp and shallow. I never said that, never even heard her ask. I look up, meeting Ethan's grim stare. "Keep reading," he urges, his voice a thread about to snap. "Michael, that's disrespectful. My dad's sick, Sarah." Sarah. "I know, honey. She's been impossible since we married. Called Ethan and Jacob brats last week when she thought I wasn't listening." The phone nearly slips from my grip, my pulse hammering in my ears. "That's a lie," I whisper, the words scraping my throat. "I never said that about you guys. Never." Ethan stares at his sneakers, scuffing the rug. "I know. Now." David steps closer, reading over my shoulder, his breath hitching as the messages pile up. Dozens, spanning months. Sarah's words twist me into someone sullen, ungrateful, a thorn in their perfect family. Sarah. "Another fight with Genevieve. She says your rules are stupid." Michael. "Maybe custody needs rethinking if she's this unhappy." My knees buckle, and I sink onto the couch, the blue light illuminating 2 years of betrayal. "Why?" The question rips from me, raw and ragged. Why would she do this? Ethan perches on the coffee table's edge, hesitating before he speaks. "After I found these, I started watching her. How she bends when he's around, never argues, says anything to keep him happy." His voice drops, heavy with realization. "Even you." David's tone cuts through, dangerously quiet. "Even her own daughter." The weight crashes over me. Sarah didn't just choose Michael. She sculpted me into the villain, poisoned every chance I had with him. Sobs rack my body, violent and unstoppable, and David pulls me close, his shirt soaking beneath my tears. "I thought it was me," I gasp, voice fracturing. "I tried so hard to make him like me." The dam crumbles, and the truth floods out, bitter but clear. I was never the problem. I sit ramrod straight in the attorney's office, the leather chair swallowing me in its stiff embrace, my nails digging half-moons into my palms. Ms. Harper's voice floats through the air-conditioned hush, steady and precise, outlining the next steps. Once we file, Sarah has 14 days to respond, she says, sliding a document across the polished desk. The words blur before me. Petitioner David White seeks primary custody of minor child Genevieve White from respondent Sarah White Reed. My chest tightens, a knot of fear and resolve twisting together. Will I have to see her? I ask, my voice small, a child's echo against the 17-year-old I'm supposed to be. Ms. Harper removes her glasses, her gaze softening. Eventually, yes, but not alone. Not until the hearing. My phone vibrates in my pocket, the 7th call from Sarah today, her name flashing like a warning. I silence it, fingers steady despite the storm inside. She won't give up easily, David says, his hand covering mine, warm and firm. But neither will we. His knee bounces slightly, a nervous tick I've never noticed before, and it anchors me, a reminder he's in this too. We rise, the paper signed, and step outside. Spring sunshine mocking the chaos churning in my gut. David's arm circles my shoulders as we descend the courthouse steps, a shield against the vertigo of everything shifting. Milkshakes? He asks, his tone light, a throwback to scraped knees and simpler fixes. I almost smile, the corner of my mouth twitching. Maybe later, I murmur, the words soft, but mine. The breeze carries the scent of blooming lilacs, and I breathe it in, tentative, testing this new ground. Sarah's calls buzz again, ignored, her voicemails piling up like debris. Genevieve, please, we need to talk. But I don't need her words anymore, not now. The evidence Ethan gave me sits heavy in my mind. 2 years of lies crystallized in those texts. A weapon I'll wield soon enough. David's truck waits in the lot, dust streaked across its hood, a constant in this unraveling mess. I climb in, the leather cool against my thighs, and he starts the engine. The rumble, a quiet promise. The courthouse fades behind us, its beige bulk shrinking in the rear view. I'm not that little girl begging for Sarah's attention, not anymore. I'm choosing this fight, this truth. The road stretches ahead, and for the first time in years, I feel the faint pulse of hope, fragile but growing. A sketch taking shape on a blank page. I sit rigid in the family court, the beige walls and squeaky linoleum pressing in, the folder of text messages a lead weight on my lap. Across the aisle, Sarah perches perfectly poised, cream blouse crisp, navy skirt smooth, her makeup a flawless mask. But I catch the tremor in her hands, the way her eyes flicker to the door, waiting for Michael, who's late, again. My fingers trace the folder's edge, the paper cool against my skin, holding 2 years of her lies. The judge, silver-haired with shrewd eyes, calls our case, her voice cutting through the hum. I understand there's new evidence, she says, and Ms. Harper strides forward, folder in hand. The judge's eyebrows lift as she scans the pages, her gaze sharpening, first on me, then Sarah. Let's discuss this in chambers, she declares. All parties, please. The chambers feel too small, the air thick with unspoken stakes. Sarah sits stiffly, hands clasped like she's praying, while Michael leans against the wall, arms crossed, his face a cold mask. David stays close, a silent sentinel at my side, his presence a tether. Ms. Harper begins, her tone measured. Mrs. Reed, care to explain these messages? Sarah's laugh cracks like brittle glass, high and sharp. Those are private, taken out of context, a wife confiding in her husband. I meet her eyes, steady for the first time, and correct her quietly. Private lies. You told him I said things I never said. You made him hate me. Her facade wavers, but she presses on. I was helping our family bond. Michael struggled with you, and You fabricated stories, David interrupts, his voice tight, anger coiling beneath control. Said she called Ethan and Jacob brats, insulted his sick father. Michael pushes off the wall, color draining from his face as he turns to Sarah. Is this true? Did she ever say those things? Silence stretches, a wire pulled taut, ready to snap. Sarah's mask crumbles, mascara smudging as tears well. I just wanted him to love me, she whispers. Not to Michael or the judge, but to me, her voice breaking. He kept comparing me to his first wife, how she'd handle things better. I was afraid. David's question lands like a stone. So, you sacrificed our daughter? I sit still, watching her tears fall, each one a hollow echo of years I spent believing I wasn't enough, not kind enough, not worthy enough. But it was never about me, it was her fear, her need to be chosen. Michael stares at her, eyes wide with dawning horror. I believed you, he says, words heavy, falling like gravel. I treated her like the problem. He turns to me, shame etching his features. I should have seen through it. I nod, acknowledging his too-late regret, but words can't rebuild what's broken. Sarah reaches for me, desperate, but I lean away and her hand drops, defeated, as both her husband and daughter slip from her grasp. The judge clears her throat, her voice firm, cutting through the wreckage. Given these circumstances, I'm recommending an immediate custody modification. Mr. White, your request for primary custody merits expedited consideration. We rise, the air shifting, lighter somehow as if truth has carved a space to breathe. Sarah's panic flares, her head snapping up, but I don't look back. Michael's gaze lingers on me, calculating, aware my untouched room still hangs unanswered between us. I meet his eyes, unflinching, no longer the shadow he ignored. The hallway swallows us as we leave, and I feel visible, raw, but real, the storm breaking into something I can hold. I stand in the hallway of what was once our blended home, watching Michael fold dress shirts into a leather suitcase, his movements precise, surgical, as if he's dissecting the life he's leaving behind. Sarah hovers beside me in the doorway, mascara streaked beneath red-rimmed eyes, her breath hitching with every shirt he packs. Please, Michael, she whispers, voice fraying. We can work through this. Couples therapy, family counseling, anything. He doesn't look up, his fingers smoothing a collar with mechanical calm. There's nothing to work through, Sarah, he says, her name formal, a slap in the quiet. You deliberately poisoned my relationship with your daughter. For years, the accusation hangs, a blade between them, and I shift, uneasy, caught in their collapse. Part of me wants to vanish, to let their ruin play out without me, but I stay, needing to see it end. Sarah reaches for his arm, desperate. I was protecting our marriage, she pleads, fingers brushing his sleeve. He pulls away, meeting her gaze at last, disgust tightening his jaw. By sacrificing your child? What kind of protection is that? The question silences her, her hand falling limp, and I wrap my arms around myself, David's cardigan soft against my skin. The house feels different, not emptier, but less suffocating, its walls exhaling years of tension. Michael zips the suitcase, the sound final, a period on their story. I need to talk to the boys, he says, brushing past me, pausing briefly shoulder to shoulder. I should have seen through it, he murmurs, eyes fixed ahead. I never gave you a chance. Before I can respond, he strides down the hall, his voice filtering through the walls, deep, steady, met with Alex's sharp outrage and Ethan's quieter probes. Sarah slides down the wall, crumpling onto the carpet, shoulders shaking. I could walk away, leave her to her consequences, but my feet stay planted, watching her unravel. Half an hour later, Michael emerges, Ethan and Jacob trailing him. Ethan's face thoughtful, Jacob's flushed with anger. We'll be at the residence inn, Michael tells Sarah, still on the floor. The boys stay in school. We'll figure out schedules. He dips into his office, returning with Rusty, my old stuffed dog, one ear frayed from nights I clung to him after David and Sarah split. My breath catches as he holds it out. Found this in the attic last week, he says. Should have given it to you sooner. I take Rusty, fingers finding that worn spot instinctively, a tether to a smaller me. Thank you, I manage, voice steady. He nods, eyes shadowed. I let myself believe her because it was easier, Genevieve. I'm sorry, for whatever that's worth now. It's worth something, a crack in his armor, but I just clutch Rusty tighter and nod. The front door closes with a quiet click, not a slam, and somehow that's worse. A soft end to a loud lie. Sarah's voicemails will pile up soon, but I'm done listening. I'm here, seen, and that's enough. I curl in David's window nook, the city lights smudging into distant stars beyond the glass, my knees drawn up beneath his cardigan. The phone with its damning texts sits on the nightstand, a silent witness to 2 years of Sarah's lies, its cracked screen glowing faintly in the dark. David leans in the doorway, his silhouette steady against the hall's soft light, watching me with quiet eyes. What now? He asks, voice low, leaving space for my answer. I straighten, shoulders squaring as something crystallizes inside, sharp and sure. I want to tell the truth, I say, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice. All of it. The words settle between us, a vow I didn't know I'd make until they're out. For years, I lived in shadows, she wove. Sarah's stories painting me as the problem, the sullen girl Michael couldn't reach, the daughter she stopped defending. I press my fingers against Rusty's frayed ear, the texture grounding me. A reminder of nights I cried myself quiet after their divorce, before Michael's shadow stretched over us. The truth is a weapon now, a blade to cut through her narrative, and a shield to guard what's mine. It'll destroy what's left of her perfect facade, but it'll protect me too, pulling me into light no matter how it burns. David steps closer, his hand resting on my shoulder, warm and firm. You don't have to do it alone, he says, and I nod, the weight of his promise easing the ache in my chest. The city hums beyond the window, a pulse I can feel in my bones, and I imagine facing Sarah in court, her tears useless against the texts Ethan gave me. Michael's regret won't rebuild what he broke, but his leaving cracked open a space for me to breathe. Ethan's eyes, soft with apology, linger in my mind. Maybe there's something to salvage there, a thread to mend later. I lean my forehead against the cool glass, breath fogging the pain. The storm's easing, rage and grief settling into strength, a sketch taking shape on a blank page. I've been invisible too long, but now I blaze, raw and real. The truth will be my voice, and I'm ready to speak it, loud enough to echo beyond these walls.